Hello, dear listener. Welcome to the Future Seeds podcast. I'm your host, Cyprian, and in this show, I explore groundbreaking solutions to our world's unique problems by connecting seemingly unrelated fields such as technology, ecology, community, and spirituality. The topic for this episode is the future of our world in terms of ecology and demography. Our planet is facing ecological collapse. Every day, over 200 species are becoming extinct. In this episode, I'm interviewing Damon Gameau. Damon is an Australian television and film actor and director. In August 2019, he released a movie called 2040, a positive vision of our future if we start applying now the solutions that are available to us. 2040 has recently been featured at the United Nations and provides us with real-life practical ways to tackle the large-scale problems the world is facing. Good evening, Damon, or morning.
Yes, good morning, evening. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. It's the start of the day, and I'm in this beautiful podcast studio in south of France.
Good.
Damon, could you tell us what the 2040 movie is about?
So 2040 is ostensibly a visual letter to my daughter, who's 5, just showing her what the world could look like in 2040 if we put into practice the best solutions that exist today across a range of areas, from transport to energy to agriculture to the oceans. And I call it an exercise in fact-based dreaming. So everything I show in 2040 has to exist now. I can't make anything up. It's not this sort of utopian fantasy. It's just based on extrapolating the best solutions that we have available now. And really it comes as a response to the overwhelming dystopian narrative that we're getting around many of our ecological problems. And it's important to acknowledge how bad things are, but I think as a way to motivate people, especially our children, I think if we only keep hearing the bad news, then it can really shut people down and cause paralysis. So this is really an antidote to that and offers up an accompanying narrative that says, hey, there are wonderful things we can do, and let's start putting all that energy that we're storing up and we're angry about and we're frustrated, let's start channeling it into tangible actions that we can move forward on.
Yeah, I went to see the movie back in Australia, and it's rare to see a movie that has a positive take on the future and it feels good. And how it's presented is quite awesome. Journeying through a movie with your little girl and you explaining that you want the world to be good for her. Could you tell us a bit more about the actual solutions you offer in the movie?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is saying there that I think that being positive at the moment is almost the radical option. And there's a really lovely quote by a guy named Raymond Williams, and he says that to be truly radical is to make hope possible rather than despair convincing. And I think we've just done such a good job of telling everyone how bad it is. And it's like going to the doctor. If you just keep telling you how bad things are, you'll shut down. But you want the doctor to start telling you the solutions and what you might be able to get on with. So that's really what I did. I spent about 8 months with a researcher, and we interviewed almost 100 different academics and scientists and researchers from around the world, and then sort of collated a whole series of different solutions that were out there. And then spent 3 years going and filming those solutions, went to about 15 countries, and then, put them all into a documentary and did all the filming, and then did about 8 months of special effects to sort of bring the vision of 2040 to life. But I think important to mention is that it's not just based on my own visions of 2040. I consulted about 120 kids from around the world, from Bangladesh to Tanzania to the US and Europe, and asked them what they wanted to see in the world. So it's really the narrative was guided by their visions and dreams and hopes for the future rather than just mine. So it really does give a cross-section of what these kids wanted. And some of those we explored were, a lot of them mentioned energy. They wanted clean energy and solar panels. So we went out and looked for some of the best solutions there and came across an initiative out of Bangladesh, which is almost like a decentralized microgrid system that operates in a village where any home that has a solar panel and a battery has this special box, and it allows them to connect to another home with solar panels and a battery. And when they combine, they actually form a grid on their own, like a microgrid. So it becomes like a community water tank of energy that other people can give to or take from. And even if you don't have solar panels and a battery, but you've got this box, you can still connect into that particular network. So people are starting to buy and sell and exchange, even donate their energy amongst the village, which makes them incredibly resilient in case the main grid shuts down, but also allows that money to stay within the community. It doesn't go off to a sort of a hierarchical utility company like we have in Australia and the rest of the world. So I just thought that was such a wonderful solution, and really, if we're going to reach a better 2040, we have to decentralise so many of our systems, I think, and especially given the levels of income inequality now, we're sort of at aristocracy levels, which we know is destabilising society. So it just felt like such a great, holistic, well-rounded solution. You know, it's clean energy, but it's also benefiting sort of the community. So that was really exciting. And then we looked at other solutions around, less vehicles, like autonomous electric vehicles, and what that could do to our cities. And then particularly we looked at the biological solutions, so things like regenerative agriculture, which takes carbon dioxide from the air and puts it back into the soil with a whole heap of benefits. And we looked at the role of seaweed, which is really quite a magical solution for our problems. It's the fastest growing organism in the world, grows 0.5 metre a day and up to 50 metres long. So it just is pulling that carbon out of the atmosphere at a really rapid rate. And then we're able to harvest that and store it below 1,000 metres. It sinks to the bottom of the ocean and gets trapped there by the weight of the ocean. So it's stored as carbon there for potentially millennia. So, there was a whole range of different things we explored. It was tough to try and condense it down.
I also remember one of the big solutions proposed was to educate women, which is quite a different kind of solutions. Could you explain that one?
Yeah, that was a real surprise, actually, and for me anyway. I haven't heard this mentioned in relation to climate change. So it works out that according to the UN, there's about 96 million girls around the world in both developing and wealthier nations that don't get to finish their education. So that's for a host of reasons, whether it's religious or they're pulled out for work or any other reason. And when that happens, that the girl's likely to have 5 or more children. But if she's able to complete her education, stay in school, given access to reproductive health services, given valuable work opportunities, she gets to choose when and how many children she has, and that number comes down to 2. So that difference between having 2 children or 5 or more children by 2050 means the difference of 1.1 billion people. So obviously that amount of people has an enormous impact on our resources and climate change and everything else. So it's one of those beautiful solutions that, let's empower women and girls anyway. That's a great thing to do for society, but we get this terrific bonus off the back of it, which relates to our resources and the climate.
Amazing. I like the fact that the solutions are quite diverse. Technological, educational, any political insights?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I sort of deliberately stayed away from the film being too political, and that was a conscious choice. I had a lot of it in there at one point, and, really, as you see, it's quite an aspirational piece that's really based on hope and quite uplifting, and I aimed it at children in particular because I know how overwhelmed they are with this topic. And I think it's a great shame that this issue has been so deeply politicised because, there were times where it wasn't. If you go back to the late 1980s, you had pretty much 2 bastions of right-wing politics, George Bush Sr. and Margaret Thatcher. Both of them, or Margaret Thatcher in particular, addressing the UN, saying that climate change was the most important issue that humanity was facing, and we had to come together and start, solving the problem. In the same way that we'd come together with the hole on the ozone layer. We signed the Montreal Protocol, and what do you know? Now the ozone layer is actually repairing because we got rid of the gases that we knew were doing problem to that ozone layer. So we were on track to start solving this problem, and my researchers said that that's when Exxon and Shell in particular started to realise that this was going to happen. They were investing heavily in renewable energy at the time, but then realised that there was going to be quite heavy regulation on what were their very strong assets. So they decided to sort of develop this really extensive denial campaign, which they've done magnificently, to be honest, and they've told a very, very good story ever since. But as a result, I think the issue's become deeply politicised. I don't think it helped when Al Gore came out and released his film. I spoke to a couple of Republican senators in researching this film, and they said, look, it was tricky because some of us did think climate change was happening, but the minute the other team was saying it was happening, they sort of had to take a stance. So there's been a combination of factors that has made this topic political. But unfortunately, I think we have to find a way to not politicise it, to bring everyone along for the ride, because if we can communicate this around our children, communities, clean air and clean water, we've got a much better chance of getting through this. I think it's so polarised now that we just have to try and find new ways of communicating this, and that's obviously what I've tried to do in the film is to sell a vision of a future and not spend too much time getting bogged down, but actually bring people along for the ride by saying, you know what, money can stay in your community. You can have a stronger community. You can have a better career or job, building a better and cleaner future for our children. So I think storytelling is a huge part of this, and we haven't given it enough attention. We've just relied on the science and the facts and the logic and hoped that would get people over the line. But unfortunately, or fortunately, we're a species that's evolved for storytelling. And I think it's really important that we start telling new stories about what we want our future to look like.
I totally agree. My little gimmick for Future Seed is planting a different narrative.
There you go. Yeah, very good.
At the moment, what are the major obstacles to all these solutions you offer in the movie?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long-winded answer. There's lots of different complicated barriers to this, and I think the biggest one is just the system we've created for ourselves that's so entrenched. It's the story that we've told about our development, and that's very tricky to unravel from. You know, as we know, most of the money supply is debt, so that means there's a constant growth that we have to achieve, and that constant growth means that we're, deforesting and we're destroying species and we're doing all sorts of things in the name of keeping this GDP going and this idea of constant growth, and that's having a huge problem, and that's probably our biggest challenge because it's so embedded in the culture. And any world leader, if they sort of have slow growth, they'll go into recession and they'll lose their seat. They'll certainly lose their place at the G20 or the G8, which is obviously seen as a badge of honour. So that's a really big block. I think there are certain rules of the game that a lot of the public wouldn't know about that favour corporations and give them huge advantages over our environment, and I think that's a great tragedy. So there's one in particular called an ISDS clause, an investor-state dispute settlement, which is part of the World Trade Organization, and it allows a company to sue a government for impacting its ability to make profit. And there's numerous it's been around for a while, and it's starting to come to light now because there's been quite a few cases where there's a famous one of on the Elbe River, which is a beautiful river in Hamburg. There was a big Vattenfall wanted to build a big coal power station. And the German government went and did an assessment and said, you know what, you can't build it here because your wastewater is going to go into the river. It's going to cause problems for the fish. We're not going to let you have it. So the company sued the government for $1.4 or $1.7 billion in loss of profits. And of course, the government couldn't match that. They also weren't allowed to countersue. That's the rule of the WTO. So they backed down. So the power station got built, and sure enough, the wastewaters are going to the river and all the fish are dying. So unless we change those structural barriers, where what that did was override democracy. The people of Germany and the government they represented spoke up and said, no, we don't want this because we want a clean river. But the corporation had so much power that they were able to shut that down. And what's more, the case where that's held in the World Trade Organization, that case is held completely in secret. There's 3 people on the panel that are put there appointed by the WTO. It happens away from the media. There's no public allowed. So it's just a completely undemocratic process. And, I think that's a hijack of our democracy, and I think we've just got to be careful with that. It's not to say that we can't have big business, we can't have corporations, we can't have innovation. That's important. But if they are overriding our democratic processes, then we desperately need to look at that and rewrite them.
Right, so structural issues. I know that at the moment there's also a big climate deniers movement with the so-called 500 scientists writing a letter.
Yeah, well, I can tell you about that one. So, yeah, that was a recent a letter that was sent by a group called Clintel, which is so it was 500 alleged scientists came together and wrote a letter to the UN at the same time that the Climate Action Summit was on, saying that we believe that there is no climate emergency. So when you scratch a little deeper, you find that was set up by a group of fossil fuel and mining companies, a handful of them, and that only 10 of those 500 scientists were actually climate scientists. And even the science they use, those 10, has been completely debunked by everyone who's been on the IPCC panel. So it's been cherry-picked to tell a story. But again, the real story is that 490 of those scientists have no idea about climate or aren't related to climate. So again, incredibly misleading. They know that once the public sees 500 scientists, they're going to think that that's legitimate. But again, you just need to scratch deeper. And this was done about 5 or 10 years ago too, with an initiative called the Global Petition. And it was apparently 31,000 scientists that got together and said climate change wasn't real. Again, funded by the fossil fuel industry. And it turned out that about 10% of them were only climate scientists. So
the funding for this movement seems to come from the oil industry.
Well, yeah, there's a guy from Drexel University in the UK, Robert Bruhl is his name, and he did quite a remarkable job of going through all the tax returns of the fossil fuel industries and looking at where that money went to various lobbying groups. And he found they spent about $1 billion a year on climate denial programs. And Exxon were really good at it to start. What they do is fund a range of different organisations, so it looked like there was a big widespread consensus of denial movements, but actually all of those groups were funded by the same company, which was Exxon. So they've been very good at sort of giving this impression that there's it's brilliant. And I think that's what we've got to realise, is that they have been telling the narrative, and they've done a superb job at it, and they've got the money to do it, and they've got the algorithms to do it, and they know how to create the evocative memes. And in a lot of ways, I think the climate scientists, the progressive side of politics, have just been a little bit too nice with all this, and haven't understood how sinister and tactical that the other side have been. And I think there's people now starting to realise that we have to sort of come back at that a bit. And I guess my film's part of that as well. Is like, let's actually start. Yeah,
because there seems to be another gang, another crew. Because you've just been invited to the United Nations to present your movie.
Yeah, so it was pretty surreal. So what they did is they asked, because we'd actually screened the film to them about a year ago before the film came out, and they just loved the sort of the visioning piece. So they asked to use about 3 or 4 minutes of the film, and they wrapped it around the hall of the General Assembly at the opening. So all the world leaders sat in there, and they were sort of wrapped around, shown visions of what the world could look like if we acted on climate. And it was pretty special to be there. And it was about a minute before Greta came out and then sort of opened a can of how dare you on everyone. And so to be in the room for that and witness that was pretty special. And then, I was there for the whole week, and I got to speak one day. And then we also did a screening for all the youth delegates, which was actually the real highlight, to see just how switched on this sort of younger generation is. And we had a panel of 4 or 5 young girls, one from Mexico and Denmark and Brazil, and just to see how empowered these young women are. And that's what's really exciting, I think, about this climate movement at the moment. It is being quite female-led by young, strong, ferocious and honest females, and I think that's really quite breathtaking to watch. And they're very intelligent, they're very articulate, and if we are going to get through this, we certainly need a feminine perspective on many of our problems.
So I was in South Portugal in that incredible community in May, and there was a 23 years old Brazilian girl there who lives and works in one of the most dangerous favelas in Brazil. And she leads this incredible project there. And every time she'd open her mouth, I thought to myself, she has the wisdom of 1,000 years old woman.
That's right.
And I remember the sentence she said. We were talking about all those places where it's really hard to rebuild trust between human beings. And I asked, so how do you do that? And she pondered for a while, and she said, I often ask myself if I believe in people's capacity to change or in my capacity to change people.
That's right.
And I was like, wow, 23 years old.
Yeah, I don't know that I was capable of a sentence like that at 23. Still now, I don't think I'm capable of a sentence like that. But no, there's some incredible humans coming through, and they're so determined and focused, and they're going to do everything they can. And that's what I love about these kids. They're just not going to stop. And I think people are starting to realise that this isn't just a fad or a bit of a trend for them. This is something they're going to see through. And, there's precedents for this in history before. We've seen this before, where very impassioned and empowered groups of people, whether it's women or the abolitionists or interracial marriage in America, whatever it might be, they've all been derided, they've been ridiculed, told to get off the streets, but they're just determined and they keep going, and slowly their numbers grow. We reach a tipping point, and then society can transform very quickly. So I certainly hope that that's the kind of trajectory we're on right now in the climate space.
Yeah, so that takes me to my next question. I know there's a 2040 movement, a 2040 community. So what's the community about? I know there's a big and active Facebook group, and there's Join the Regeneration movement. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so it's called the Regeneration movement, and it's basically what we did is not just want to make a film that would, you feel quite inspired and hopeful, and you think, right, this is great, and then 10 minutes later you're back into the world and you've forgotten about it and it's worn off and you're on Instagram again. So we worked with about 50 different organisations to have a platform that people could go to straight after the film, and it aligned with all the things they could see in the film so that they could take action on particular areas. So if it was the microgrids that I explained in Bangladesh, great. We worked with an Australian company that wanted to bring that technology to Australia, and you could do an equity crowdfund to actually be a part of making that happen. And they just got absolutely overwhelmed. They raised $1 million, and that's now going to happen in Australia. The same for the carbon, the farmers. There's an initiative that pays farmers to put carbon back in the soil, and you can donate $8 a month. And by doing that, you sequester about 1,000 tonnes of carbon a year, which actually offsets the emissions of 80 people who do nothing. So tons of people have signed up for that. The seaweed I talked about, we've raised enough money to build the first seaweed platform in Tasmania. We're now raising the money for the second one. So there's just a host of different things around educating girls, mentoring them online. We've raised thousands for that. So it just speaks volumes to how people are ready to hear solutions and they want actions. And when they're presented, they will get involved and take them on. And I think that's been a beautiful lesson for us, and we're really now trying to just make it explode even bigger. And we're about to release the film through Europe, and then we take it to Canada and America, and we're really sort of forming different partners in those territories as well to really keep going with this regeneration movement, because I think people, once they learn about it, they're really excited about it. They can see positive change, they can see tangible solutions, and they want to get involved, and they want their kids to be involved. So it's been a really interesting exercise for us, and it's almost been the test model in Australia, but we've really seen it work now, so we want to amplify it.
Absolutely, and I've advertised your movie in France a little bit already.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it.
How does the 2040 movement, the 2040 community, resonate with the Extinction Rebellion movement and Greta Thunberg?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think that what we'll find is that some people don't feel comfortable protesting or going out and that kind of civil disobedience, and yet they still want to be involved. So I guess we try to fill a gap there and say, all right, you don't necessarily have to do that. You can do both if you want. You can do one or the other, but let's actually present other options, which are, here's some tangible solutions. Here's a way for you to go and help out in your community. Here's a group you can join. Here's a discussion page. Here's how you can write to your local minister. Here's how you can actually donate or shift your finance into some of these solutions. So just trying to spread the net really wide for people and not think that we have to be prescriptive. And I think that has been a failure in a way. I think most people, if you ask them, would say, well, if I want to help the planet, I've got to eat less meat and ride my bike to work and maybe buy a Tesla, And I think that's just not applicable for everyone. We all have different passions and different interests. And that's what we try to do with the platform off the back of the film is, you get asked this questionnaire. So it's called Activate Your Plan. And we ask you what type of person you are, what you're interested in, what you resonated with in the film in particular. And then we give you 6 or 7 things based on those answers that you can get on with. And I think that just helps people. I guess the psychology would say that you're more likely to stick at that, see it through if you're connected to it and align with it, if it's your passion or purpose. Whereas if you're just forced to eat less meat or ride your bike to work, it might not be something you want to do. So again, just trying to give people and meet people where they're at and understand that not everyone is willing to go and glue their hands to the road, even though they're passionate about this topic. They're just not up for that, and I think we need to be okay with that.
Yeah, agreed. We need to have solutions for everybody.
Yeah.
So who do you work with? Who are your partners within Australia and around the world?
So it's really mixed. It's been quite interesting, the different people that have come on board. So lots of different, mainly a lot of the sort of the energy. There's lots of community energy groups in Australia. There's one called the Next Economy as well, who sort of work with, how do we transition to a better economy. Carbon8 is obviously one of our main initiatives. The Malala Fund, another group called One Girl. If people go to our website, there's about 50 different organisations, and we were quite careful about who we did align with, but also weren't too close. What's been great about the film is, how many unlikely partners have done screenings. So whether that's all the banks in Australia or even energy companies, where they've sort of invited us in, they've screened the film, and then we've had really honest conversations about what they're doing, what they're not doing, how they could improve. And I think that was a big part of making the film in the way I did, and not politicise it too much, because I think, especially some of these financial institutions, if they don't come on board, we're not going to get there. So we have to find ways to communicate to them and also get them to understand what's going on, and then they're more likely to try and shift. So, that's been, again, a very positive result, I think, I've been shocked at the type of people that have done screenings and organisations that I don't think they would have looked at a film like this 5 years ago.
Yeah, so banks are becoming a bit more receptive.
Some are. Unfortunately, the American banks aren't as much, but lots of other banks around Europe, Australia certainly are, and the banks here, it's interesting, some of the bigger ones said, look, we've got 12 million customers, and now they are writing to us every single day saying, why aren't you divesting from fossil fuels? What are you doing about climate change? So they're getting that pressure. And one of the best things that came out of the UN for me was hearing how many companies, including very big ones like Maersk, which is the biggest shipping company in the world, who've now agreed to go clean energy by 2045 or 2050, make all their ships electric, because they actually are struggling to get people to work for them out of universities, because these kids are graduating from the unis now and saying, well, I'm not going to come and work for you because your company is a degenerative company that is destroying the planet. I'm not interested. So it's forcing them to actually change their ways, and that's happening right through America and the UK as well. That these kids, this new generation has a very different set of cultural values and cultural norms and what they accept, and they're not prepared to go and earn money in a company that's going to hurt their future.
Oh, that resonates with my own story. It's really awesome to hear that. I listened to this TED Talk the other day where this woman, she's a specialized doctor who sees people dying from tobacco every day. She is trying to divert funds from banks and insurances and redirect them away from tobacco. Right. So I saw, and I already bought my tickets as well. You're participating in that conference going local in March.
Oh, am I? I'm not sure. Was that with Helena Norberg-Hodge?
Yeah.
Yeah, Helena. So Helena is a very good friend, and she was in the film as well. And she's one of those pioneers that's been sort of spruiking this message for years and years and years, and banging her head against a wall and then having all sorts of interesting conversations. But she's really been an advocate for sort of localising things, much like the decentralised energy I was talking about in Bangladesh. She's been sort of pushing that for years and doing the same with our food systems and everything else. So, always happy to support Helena. She's an absolute legend in this space.
And Mr. Suzuki is participating as well, and Charles Einstein.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's fantastic. I didn't know they were going to be there. That's lovely to hear.
It's a 2-3 days event as well.
Right, and I'm there, am I? Am I listed as being there?
You're there, absolutely.
Oh, okay, it's good to know. I better turn up then.
In terms of going local, you and I know I built this website for you, byron2040.com.au. You're setting up, how to call them, idea boxes all around the world for locals to be able to propose ideas and imagine their future.
The website is, thank you very much. You've done an amazing job, may I say. Congratulations. But it's basically to just, again, because I guess the 2040 film was quite broad and generic in terms of sort of looking at a vision of a wider sense of what the world could look like. I thought it would be really interesting to test it on a local level. So we've sort of built this website inviting people in our region to sort of contribute and say what they want for 2040 to look like in this particular region. So we will then take that information and turn it into a bit of a visual piece to then show to policymakers or to business and investors here and say, look, this is what the community has come together and they'd like these kind of things to look like in our future. How do we actually make that happen and start building it and bringing it to life? So again, I think it's like a manifestation tool. If people can see it first, then they've got a better idea of what they want to invest in. It might excite them. They'll get their hopes up and think, let's create that. That would be a great thing. So I really just think that's the way we're going to do this. If we've got to start putting up new visions and telling stories and, as you said, new narratives, and that's the way we're going to bring people along. Yeah,
and it seems like Sydney is doing something similar, and maybe you might replicate this?
Well, who knows? Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see if it... a lot of councils in Australia have done the screenings of the film and then really got their residents to talk about and have discussions about what it might look like in 2040. So it could be an interesting exercise to go back to some of them and offer to do some sort of visualising for them as well and put it into a format that they could share around to their constituents and get people to agree on it or give notes on it and see if this is actually a vision that they want to strive for.
Well, really awesome work, Damon. I've asked all my questions and I've received pretty awesome answers, but I'd like to give you 20 seconds now to say something. If you have something to say to the world, it's something that really touches you, that you want people to know.
Yeah, I guess it would be that we're at a point now where I think we're not getting the leadership at the highest levels that we should be getting. So it's important for everyone to find their own agency or find their voice in whatever capacity that is, and whether it's approaching your boss at work about some certain practices there or at the local school, even in your own house. I think it's not enough to just sort of buy a keep cup or use a paper straw anymore. We've actually got to find our own voice. And I'll end with what is my favourite quote from an Arctic explorer named Robert Swan. And he said that the greatest threat to the planet is the belief that someone else will save it.
Wow. This is a perfect ending. I'm just going to end it right now. No, actually, no. Everyone listen to this. Hop onto your computer, open your browsers, and type whatsyour2040.com.
Yeah, whatsyour2040.com, and then you'll see a button there that says activate your plan, and we'd encourage everyone to hit that button and fill out the questionnaire and then see what you resonate with.
Yep. Join the Regeneration. Everybody join the Regeneration. And on that note, thank you so much, Damon.
Thanks, Cyprian. See you later.
Hello, dear listener. The Future Seeds project is supported by you. If you like the show and what it stands for, you can support it starting at just $1 per month, access extended content, and enable this podcast to thrive. Just head to futureseeds.blog/Patreon, and thank you in advance for your support.